10 years in, and my greatest crime was consistency. I was the 4 a.m. train you could set your watch by, the sturdy oak that never dropped a surprising leaf. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't unfaithful. I simply wasn't thrilling enough to compete with the fictions Lorelai spun in her head. But let's start at the beginning. On the night the fiction declared war on reality, I heard the key rattle twice in the lock before she finally got it in. Typical Lorelai. She could charm a bouncer, a bartender, and an entire boardroom with a single, calculated smile. But the front door lock, after 3 glasses of Prosecco, remained her unbeatable enemy. She stumbled in like the star of a romantic comedy, minus the charm and plus the faint scent of desperation. Her perfume hit me first, a cloying cloud of citrus, sugar, and the faint guilt of someone who hoped you wouldn't ask how the night truly went. I was at the kitchen counter, working on absolutely nothing that mattered. An open laptop displayed a blank spreadsheet, a monument to my pretense. Beside it, a coffee cup I hadn't refilled in hours. Just enough props to look occupied, to maintain the fragile peace of our shared space. Lorelai walked in, heels in one hand, phone still lit in the other like a talisman. Her lips were a shade too red, a little blurred at the edges. Her laugh, as she tossed her keys into the ceramic bowl, was a little too loose. "Girls' night," she declared. The words a court ruling. No defense allowed. She went straight for the bottle of Merlot I'd left out, pouring herself a glass like she'd earned it by surviving the manufactured chaos of dancing on rooftops and feigning interest in her friend Maya's engagement. She leaned against the marble counter with the posture of someone who used to live here, but was just visiting now, a tourist in the museum of our life together. "You ever think," she began, swirling the wine so vigorously it threatened to spill, "that maybe love should feel more like electricity and less like a pension plan?" Ah, here it comes, the monologue. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. She wanted a stage, not a conversation. I kept my eyes fixed on the glowing, empty cells of the spreadsheet. "Maya says I'm glowing lately," she added, as if this were an objective medical opinion from a qualified observer and not a wine-fueled compliment from her chief enabler. "Glowing or radioactive?" I asked, finally glancing up. The sarcasm was a pebble tossed into a canyon. It made no sound upon landing. "Maybe," she giggled, missing the point entirely. "We were talking about love tonight. Like, real love. The kind that burns, not this schedule." I closed the laptop. The soft click was louder than a gunshot in the tense air. The silence that followed fell hard enough to be loud, a physical weight in the room. The low, mournful hum of the refrigerator felt like a chorus of sympathy. She sipped her wine again, her eyes distant. "You give stability, Alistair." She said it slowly, pronouncing the word stability as if it were a foreign and disappointing dish she'd been served. "But I want passion." There it was, framed and gift-wrapped. The thesis statement of her discontent. I looked at her then, truly looked. She wasn't apologizing for the thought, she was performing it. Her posture, her gaze, the way she held her glass, it was all rehearsed. Probably in the Uber on the way home, with Maya providing directorial notes. "Stability," I said. "My voice even. You make it sound like a disease." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so practiced it was devoid of any real emotion. "Don't make this a thing." I tilted my head. "Oh, I won't. You already did." Another sip of wine. Another beat of silence. I don't feel alive anymore," she whispered, the volume lowered for dramatic effect. "I want to feel that fire again, the way it used to be." "You want fireworks." "I get it," I said, my voice still unnervingly calm. "Candles aren't loud enough." That earned me a frown, a genuine crack in the performance. "You don't understand." "No, I do," I said, standing up from the stool. "I understand more than you think. I've just stopped trying to decorate it with optimism." She stared at me, waiting. She was waiting for the explosion, for the begging, for the desperate pleading that would validate her power in this relationship. She wanted me to fight for the very thing she was claiming to despise. I gave her none of it. "Don't take it personally," she said, the line delivered with the hollow sincerity of a corporate layoff. I nodded slowly. "Sure, I'll file it under random acts of emotional arson. Not personal at all." She said it again, like a mantra, like she expected applause for finally being honest with the man who'd been boring enough to pay the mortgage on time for a decade. And when I didn't explode, when I didn't beg or bargain or break, she looked confused, genuinely lost. Like an actress who had forgotten her lines because her co-star had walked off the stage. She had stepped off a curb she didn't know was there. She went upstairs without another word. The soft thud of her bare feet on the hardwood, a gentle retreat. It was the kind of silence that used to mean peace between us. Now, it just meant clarity. I stayed in the kitchen. I put the cork back in the bottle of Merlot. I wiped the crimson ring of wine off the counter with a damp cloth, scrubbing at it like it was blood spatter from a truth she thought wouldn't stain. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was quieter, heavier. It wasn't heartbreak, it was alignment. It was the feeling of gears, after months of grinding noise, finally shifting into their correct and terrible place. She wanted fire. What she didn't realize was that I had just turned off the gas. She slept in. I didn't. In the morning, the first morning of our new reality, I made coffee for one. I scrambled 2 eggs in a small pan I hadn't used in months, because apparently, predictability doesn't cook breakfast for 2 anymore. The routine was the same, but the geometry of it had changed. There was an empty space beside me at the counter that felt more honest than her presence ever had. She came downstairs eventually, wrapped in that oversized university sweatshirt that screamed, "I'm the victim here," in a soft cotton blend. Puffy eyes, slow steps, damage control mode, fully engaged. "Morning," she mumbled, as if the word itself might explode if spoken too loudly. "Morning," I replied, using the same neutral tone I reserve for delivery guys and automated phone systems. The coffee machine hissed in the background like it was tired of this drama too. She hovered near the fridge, opening it to look inside as if the solution to our problems might be hiding behind the Greek yogurt. "We're out of oat milk," she noted, her voice directed at a shelf of condiments. She wasn't looking at me. "I noticed," I said, sipping my black coffee with the newfound confidence of a man no longer required to purchase lactose-free alternatives for someone who was emotionally lactose intolerant. "I'll grab some later," she said to the door of the fridge. Then, after a beat, a question laced with cautious hope. "Did I say anything weird last night?" I placed my plate in the sink, the ceramic clinking softly against the stainless steel. "You said I give you stability, but you want passion," I stated plainly, my voice devoid of accusation. "Among other things." She winced. Not because she regretted the words, but because I remembered them. "I was drunk," she offered, as if alcohol were a separate entity that had kidnapped her mouth and forced it to speak inconvenient truths. "I know," I said. That's why it sounded honest. She didn't laugh. Her attempt at a casual, morning-after deflection had failed. "Can we not make this a thing?" "Oh, I'm not making anything," I replied, turning to face her for the first time that morning. "I'm just adjusting my expectations. You know, like you did." She stared, her mouth slightly agape, waiting for a fight she could win, a storm she could navigate. I gave her a simple, placid nod and walked out of the kitchen. At work, everything tasted cleaner. The air in my office felt crisper. It was like I'd cleared some invisible virus that had been running in the background, slowing down my entire operating system. I closed 3 long-standing support tickets before noon. I cleaned out my inbox with a ruthless efficiency, evicting old emails like they were squatters who had overstayed their welcome. A calendar reminder popped up at 11:30 a.m., anniversary dinner res, La Pearl. I stared at it for a moment, then right-clicked and deleted the event without a second thought. I found the digital note I'd set for myself 3 weeks ago. Florist, peonies for Lorelei. Delete. The silence that followed in my digital life felt like relief, not grief. When I got home that evening, the air in the house felt different. Not because she was gone, her car was in the driveway, but because I was. The old me, the one who would have walked in bearing a peace offering of takeout or flowers, was gone. Lorelei was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to read the book that lay open on her lap. I walked past her like a ghost who no longer haunts the same house, heading straight for the kitchen. "Are you okay?" she asked, the question thrown over the back of the sofa, her eyes still glued to the screen. "I'm great," I said from the kitchen, my voice carrying easily into the living room. "Just making room for passion. Figured I'd start by removing stability from your environment." Her thumb stopped its endless scrolling. She blinked. That one landed. "You're being different," she said, her voice now holding a note of accusation. "I heard you," I replied simply. "I'm adapting." "So, this is your version of punishing me?" "No," I said calmly, opening the fridge to pull out the ingredients for a sandwich. "This is my version of believing you." By Tuesday, the house got quieter. Not empty, just less padded. I wasn't slamming doors or making grand theatrical speeches. I just stopped filling the silence she used to pretend not to hear. There were no more morning check-ins about her day. No more, "I'll grab it on the way home." No more calendar invites for dinners she wouldn't show up to anyway. There was just space. And the sound of Lorelei walking through it, like someone trying to locate furniture in a room that had been rearranged in the dark without her permission. She was lost, and for the first time in a decade, I had no intention of handing her a map. Wednesday morning, she hovered near the front door as I was grabbing my keys. Her presence was a question mark in the air. "Do you have time to talk tonight?" she asked, her eyes searching my face, trying to find the old version of me, the one who would have dropped everything for the possibility of a conversation. "About what?" I asked, my hand on the doorknob. She hesitated. About what I said. I think I might have said it wrong. "I understood it perfectly," I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You were just being honest. But I shouldn't have dumped that on you after a night out." "You're right. You shouldn't have." She blinked, the simple agreement hitting her harder than any argument would have. I was no longer a sparring partner. I was a mirror, reflecting her own words and actions back at her. She searched my face for softness, for outrage, for any familiar emotional terrain she could work with. What she found was stone. She nodded slowly. The expression of someone realizing the door they just walked through doesn't open from the other side. That night, I folded laundry. A simple, domestic task. But the ritual had changed. My clothes went into my drawers. Hers I placed in a neat pile on the bed. When she walked in, she saw the pile, then looked at me, a question in her eyes. "Did I do something?" she asked. "You told me the truth," I said, folding one of my own shirts. "I'm organizing accordingly." Her jaw tightened. "You're being impossible." "No," I said, finally looking at her. "I'm being predictable. That used to be your favorite thing about me." The real truth arrived at 2:12 a.m. She'd left her phone charging in the kitchen, screen up, a breadcrumb trail for a story she wasn't brave enough to tell out loud. Maybe that was her game all along. Leave just enough to be seen, but never enough to be caught. I had only gotten up for a glass of water. That's all I meant to do. But there it was, the screen glowing with a new message notification. "Sterling work. Still thinking about that elevator ride." Elegant. The word floated in my mind. He chose the word elegant. Not hot, not crazy. Elegant. I tapped the screen. No password. Of course not. Why protect what you secretly want discovered? There were only a few messages exchanged over the past week. Nothing too explicit, nothing too innocent. Just enough plausible deniability for her to wrap herself in, if I ever asked. "Lorelei, he barely talks to me anymore. I think he knows." "Sterling work. So you said." "He doesn't react?" "Lorelei. Exactly. That's what makes it worse." "Sterling work. Then you're already free, babe. Come over this weekend." No emojis. Just heat. Delivered in cold, efficient grayscale. I locked the phone and placed it back on the counter, exactly as I had found it. No screenshots. I didn't need evidence for a court of law. She had already confessed in spirit, just outsourced the delivery to a man named Sterling. The pain wasn't a sharp, sudden stab. It was a cold, creeping numbness. It was the final confirmation that her quest for passion wasn't a philosophical yearning. It was a destination with a name and a weekend plan. The next morning, I was already at the counter with my black coffee when she came downstairs, wearing the same sweatshirt, the same armor of fake ease. She moved like she was trying to perform normal, but had forgotten the script halfway through. "Morning," she said, reaching for the fridge. I slid the carton of oat milk across the counter towards her. The one she claimed she was going to pick up. Her eyes flicked to it, surprised. "Oh, thanks." "Sure," I said, sipping my coffee like I hadn't read her exit plan 6 hours ago. She sat down at the counter, watching me, studying my face as if it might betray how much damage had been done. And then she dared. She actually dared to ask it. "Are we okay?" I let the question hang in the air, a fragile, ridiculous thing. I let it hover just long enough to make her sweat. Then I looked at her, my expression placid. "I read one of your texts last night," I said casually, as if discussing the weather. Her body stiffened, as if a string had been pulled too tight. "What? What line?" I turned to her slowly. Calm. Dead calm. "He barely talks to me anymore. I think he knows." Silence. A flicker of pure panic in her eyes. And then, right on cue, the performance began. "I didn't mean that the way it sounds," she stammered, her voice a little too high. Oh, I know, I nodded, my tone laced with a new sharp kind of irony. I'm sure it was meant in a metaphorical, wine-glazed, soul-searching sort of way. No, Alistair. I, I just needed to vent. Of course, and vents usually lead to bedrooms now, right? That's not fair. No, it's accurate, I countered. You just don't like it said out loud. She looked away, her lips tightening. I just wanted to feel something. You've been so distant lately. I raised an eyebrow. The audacity of it was almost impressive. So your solution to emotional distance was physical proximity to someone else? An interesting approach to marital counseling. She crossed her arms, the classic defensive posture. It wasn't like that. Let me guess, I cut in, my voice still quiet, but now honed to a razor's edge. You were confused, vulnerable, misunderstood, and it just happened. You're twisting things. No, I said, standing to place my mug in the sink. I'm just not accepting the script you wrote for me, where I play the oblivious, boring husband. She stood up, her voice finally rising, cracking with frustration. You're being so damn dramatic. I turned back to her slowly. No, Lorelei. I'm being quiet, and that's worse, isn't it? Drama lets people pretend something's still alive. Silence means the funeral already happened. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There were no more lines left to improvise. She didn't apologize. Not really. There was a half-hearted, I'm sorry you feel that way, hidden in a long sentence about miscommunication 2 days later, but no mention of the elevator or Sterling or the weekend plans. Instead, she pivoted to offense. Classic Lorelei. First came the subtle jabs, designed to chip away at my resolve. You know, maybe if we actually talked once in a while, I wouldn't have to text someone else for a conversation. I gave her a slow blink. You mean like how we're talking now? So you can tell me it's my fault? She rolled her eyes and walked away as if she'd won the point. Then came the passive-aggressive social media theater. Her Instagram, once a dormant feed of old vacation photos, suddenly came alive. There were filtered lattes captioned with vague quotes about self-discovery. There were staged, laughing photos with people she barely tolerated. Her magnum opus was an Instagram story showing a single slice of decadent chocolate cake. The caption, "Finally doing things that make me feel alive." I was in the next room when she posted it. She noticed that I'd seen it. "Did you see my post?" she asked later that evening, a smirk playing on her lips. I glanced up from my book. "The cake? Happy to know you've rediscovered your inner bakery." Her frown was a small victory. The thing is, she expected a fight. She wanted it. A slammed door, a broken plate, something tangible she could point to and say, "See? He's the villain. He's the one who is angry and unstable." But I remained calm. It's hard to play the victim when the other person refuses to become your villain. Her campaign escalated. Tasha, her best friend, texted me out of the blue. "Lorelei's not herself lately. You guys okay? Hope you're taking care of her." I ignored it. Then her mother called. "We've always loved you like a son, Alistair," she began, her voice dripping with practiced concern. "And I just hope you don't give up on my daughter too quickly." Cute. They were on some kind of pity rotation, a well-coordinated attack on my composure. Meanwhile, Lorelei posted a boomerang of herself staring sadly out a cafe window, the rain-streaked glass a perfect pathetic fallacy. The caption, "When you love someone, but the silence becomes louder than the words." Right, the silence. Or maybe I was just done yelling into an emotional black hole. She was building a narrative for her audience, casting herself as the tragic heroine in a loveless marriage. But I was no longer a member of her audience. I was backstage, watching her pull the levers and adjust the lighting, and I was not impressed by the show. I never imagined my search history would include divorce lawyer near me and how to serve papers without drama in the same week. But there we were. On a Wednesday afternoon, I sat across from a clean-cut man named Eric, whose face looked like it hadn't cracked a smile since 2012. He was exactly the kind of man I wanted on my side. He asked the standard questions. I gave calm, brutal answers. Assets? Shared house? 2 cars. Children? None. Thank God. Grounds? Adultery, I said. Implied, but cleverly vague. She's smart that way. He nodded. A curt, professional gesture. He'd heard it 1,000 times before. Are you emotionally ready for the fallout, Mr. Hayes? I actually smiled, a thin, humorless expression. I've been living in the fallout for months. I'm ready for the cleanup. That night, Lorelei tried a new tactic. Seduction. She walked into the kitchen wearing nothing but a smile and one of my old button-down shirts, the one I used to love on her. "Morning," she said, her voice a sugary purr. She leaned against the counter, the shirt gaping just so, a weaponized memory. "I was thinking we could do something this weekend. Just us." I looked up slowly from my coffee, my gaze as cold as the morning air. "You want a weekend getaway with the man you called passionless, the one who just pays the bills and takes up space?" She blinked, faltered. The purr died in her throat. I didn't mean it like that." "No, you meant it exactly like that," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "You just didn't think I'd quote you back while still remembering your favorite wine and your shellfish allergy. That's the problem with stability, Lorelei. It has a very good memory." She tried to laugh it off, a brittle, ugly sound. "You're being so cold." I sipped my coffee. "That's the forecast now." The following evening, I took the manila envelope from my briefcase. Inside was a copy of the divorce petition Eric had prepared. Unsigned, but ready. I walked into our bedroom. She wasn't there. I placed the envelope squarely on her vanity, right next to her expensive collection of perfumes and serums. A landmine dressed in legal paper. She saw it at 7:46 p.m. I know because I was on the living room couch, pretending to read, and I watched her walk into the bedroom, toss her bag on a chair, and then pause mid-step. I saw her body freeze. She picked it up as if it might burn her, read the first few lines, and then came the voice. Not her usual sultry, manipulative tone. Not the wounded whisper. This was a sharp, shrill panic of someone realizing they have lost complete control. "You're filing for divorce!" she yelled from the bedroom. I didn't even look up from my book. "I already did. That's a copy." She stormed into the living room, waving the papers. "You weren't even going to tell me?" "I just did." "This is insane, Alistair. You can't just decide something like this." I finally looked up at her, my focus sharp and calm. "Oh, so now things can't be decided without a discussion?" That's rich, coming from someone who had a secret weekend planned with her affair partner. Her face went pale. "You don't get to just kick me out of this house." "I'm not kicking you out," I said, standing up slowly. "But I'm not leaving either. I paid the mortgage on this place for a decade. I built the shelves you put your books on. I planted the hydrangeas you love in the garden. You want out of this marriage? Pack your skincare and your guilt and go. The door's right there." She scoffed, a desperate sound. "I'm not going anywhere without a court order." "Perfect," I said. "Then I'll see you in court. In the meantime, enjoy the guest room." "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You can't treat me like some tenant." "A tenant would have paid their rent in honesty," I snapped back, the first real heat in my voice in weeks. "You've lived here rent-free in both money and morals." That night, she sulked in the guest room, the door left open just wide enough to signal, "Look how sad I am." She wanted me to peek in, to ask if she was okay, to chase her. I didn't. I made eggs, ate them in the quiet kitchen, and slept like a stone. The war wasn't cold anymore. It was contained, and I had drawn the borders. The courtroom was beige and utterly devoid of drama. It smelled of old paper and stale coffee. Lorelei, of course, looked immaculate. She wore a soft, cream-colored dress, a costume for sympathy. Her makeup was subtle, her hair perfect. Tactical tears were clearly on standby. I sat 3 chairs away, wearing my best suit, flipping through the documents as if I were reading a brunch menu. Her lawyer opened with predictable flair. "Mrs. Hayes was emotionally abandoned." He boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, left to feel invisible in her own home, by a husband who offered stability, but no soul. My lawyer, Eric, stood up calmly when it was his turn. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Hayes would like to submit Exhibit C," he said, his voice flat, a transcript of Mrs. Hayes's text message exchange with a Mr. Sterling Dean, sent during the period of this supposed abandonment. I watched Lorelei's face. It was a masterpiece of control, but I saw it a tiny, involuntary twitch at the corner of her eye, a micro-expression of pure static. The judge, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, read the transcript in silence. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. She slowly set the file down on her bench. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "can you please clarify the timeline in which you felt so emotionally deprived while simultaneously making weekend plans with another man?" The spin in Lorelei's brain came to a grinding, audible halt. She opened her mouth, then closed it, a fish drowning in air. My client was emotionally confused. Her lawyer interjected weakly. The judge didn't even flinch. Noted. But confusion does not entitle someone to double occupancy of both reality and fiction. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. Your Honor, I don't need compensation. I don't want revenge. I want peace. And I want legal acknowledgement that being quiet is not the same as being blind. The judge nodded once, then stamped a file with a satisfying final thud. The divorce is granted. That was it, not a movie ending. No dramatic exits, no standing ovations. Just the soft, satisfying sound of a door unlocking. Outside the courthouse, under a gray, indifferent sky, she tried one last time. We could have fixed it, she whispered, her voice hoarse. If you had just tried harder. I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, for the last time. The woman I had spent a decade loving. Lorelei, my primary crime, according to you, was being boring, reliable, and emotionally flat. She nodded smugly, thinking I was finally validating her narrative. I smiled, a cold, clean smile she had never seen before. And now, thanks to you, I'm none of those things anymore. I turned and left her there in that parking lot, a solitary figure in her pale coat, surrounded by her darker truths. The court ruled in my favor. Apparently, paying the mortgage, maintaining the property, and not having an emotional affair behind your spouse's back still counts for something. The house was mine legally, officially, even poetically. She packed her things in a silence so loud it echoed through the empty rooms. She tried to look dignified while stuffing expensive lingerie and yoga mats into boxes marked fragile. There was no last plea, no final tearful scene. Just the sound of her heels clicking down the steps, and a front door that finally closed without a moment of hesitation. 3 months later, her Instagram bio changed from married vertical bar, finding myself, to healing vertical bar, soft life vertical bar, coffee lover. Sterling was nowhere in sight. A mutual acquaintance mentioned he'd moved to Texas for a job. Or maybe she just burned that bridge too fast, too. As for me, I didn't throw a party. I didn't get a tattoo or start rock climbing. I didn't post cryptic quotes about strength and growth. I just opened the windows, all of them, and let the house breathe again. I made coffee without a side of resentment. Some houses forget. Ours didn't seem to. It creaked less. It smelled better, like fresh air and clean slate. It felt like even the walls were relieved. Peace is quieter than I expected. But damn, it suits me.